I don't know if it's always been this way, but I think it's actually impossible to give anyone advice.
That might be true.
This is a perfect shot right here.
Yeah, look at that.
Some of those shots were just unreal.
Strons and I have been talking about doing a behind the scenes for like how we do these videos. The benefit, obviously, hopefully, is that it does inspire other people to go out and make cool stories, because there are stories literally everywhere.
Well, we'll start with a little tour then. You can just show me around, tell me everything I need to know. The texture. Easiest question.
You like being stung by bees?
It's fine. It's an experience. Sometimes these shoots we're shooting 2, 3 hours, 4 hours of someone talking about a very specific subject.
This is kind of nice with the bar here. I like this quite a bit, actually.
Pretty soon you're about to learn about the best interview tripod of all time, which is actually a photo tripod. Come in. Nice work. Yeah.
24 f4.
Yep.
No NDs.
Nope.
And rolling. I think at this point, we've kind of proven that we know what we're doing, hopefully, a little bit, across all the projects we've worked on over the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. But it is very hard to give advice about anything, whether it's business, work-related, or even personal. And I find this, I just got to admit defeat.
There are certain things, and by certain things, I mean most things, that you have to learn on your own. And if you don't experience it yourself, it is truly difficult to get that information to somebody and be like, no, you will feel this way. Believe me. And it goes unheard because I think that they have to experience it themselves.
There's a multitude of factors at play here. So the one I find the most common, and I think we've been in this situation many, many times, trying to distill down, okay, what's the rule? What's the takeaway? And it's immediately like the exception, right, to the rule. Because anytime you say, oh, you should, in general, we should do it this way. They should be about this long. Oh, what about this? What about that? It's the pivot away. It's not an excuse, it's the exception, because there's the other side of it, the excuses. Or there's maybe what you're describing, which is much more like, even as a dad now, anything I tell my kids, like, they don't really get it, because I remember being a kid and my dad telling me stuff and trying to give me advice, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, Dad, that's back in your day. And then you grow up and you go, oh, I see, he was right. He was actually what he's talking about.
I feel like there's definitely the difference between like a subjective and an objective, right? A piece of advice. It's like that will hurt you, right? Versus like doing something that will hurt you. It's like, that's very dangerous. I wouldn't do that if I were you, kind of thing. And then there's the other, like, more subjective, like the more creative realm that we have of, creating content. And you're just like, hey, it'd be better if you did this. But they don't know that until they've come away from it. And then they look at their own footage maybe and they say, oh, you know what? They were right. I shouldn't have done that. But again, you almost have to walk through it yourself. We used to work with one of our coworkers, and he would tell me, because he's a few years older than me, he's like, oh, you won't get it now, but in a couple years you'll get it. Which, yes, for some things, but no for others, right? It depends like what kind of path you're on. Like some things you will never encounter. Like some people that have given us advice in the past, it's like, well, a lot of it doesn't really make any sense because they might be talking about specific technology. It's like, oh, you shouldn't do this because of that. Well, that technology doesn't even exist anymore. So I may not have to listen to like that piece of advice. But
so maybe it's less advice and maybe it's more wisdom.
Wisdom for sure. And if you're talking about, I don't know, are you talking more about like technical advice or just life advice?
Everything. Because there's always the feedback. Earlier today, we were talking about what you want to do with some of the future paragraphic episodes based on, well, we've done over 40 at this point. Over 40 episodes on YouTube. Some have done really well. Some have not done as well. Always trying to refine. And your suggestion was?
Well, to be more efficient, we were talking about the different, like how many videos we would make versus how long they are, talking about like audience retention, how many people typically watch. And for those core viewers, like we were talking about like the 10,000 viewers, right? For example, if we had 10,000 viewers, about how long, should an episode be? We know we have a specific time limit that we want to hit. We want to hit around 20 minutes, but that's more for other places that the video will end up living, right? We want it to be at least 20 minutes for other platforms as well. But like, why should it be longer? And then we're looking into the analytics of like, what's the benefits of it being longer? It's like like monetizing the video. It's like we can get more money that way, but it's like, how can we make it longer without spending more days shooting, more time, at least because we want to spend one day shooting, but how can we make that one day more efficient? So I was suggesting maybe more scenes where it's less of the interview that we have to cover with B-roll. But if we had more scenes, then it could be naturally longer, because if you're watching somebody have a natural conversation, it can take up, 20 minutes easily just by standing there, watching somebody do something. But it's a lot more difficult to cover 20 minutes of footage if it's an interview. Because if you're asking a whole bunch of questions, you have to go after the fact or before and get the B-roll, the supporting footage, to cover exactly what they're talking about, unless you're doing a scene and they're already doing what they're talking about. Or if they're, doing something with their hands, you can ask them other questions and they can answer without having to cut necessarily to specific B-roll, because they're already doing something, you're already engaged. So I was just coming up with ideas of how we could be a little bit more efficient. Quite possibly by trying, asking interview questions during one of the scenes, as opposed to the traditional interview portion where we have them sat down.
So in my mind, and I don't know if you know this about me, but I literally imagine scales, like when you're balancing something, right? But not just the one side versus the other, like the traditional scale that you think of, like, oh, I put something heavy on this side and it tipped it, right? Almost like a teeter-totter or a seesaw. But literally like 10 or 20 scales in my mind of all the factors, all the decisions that get made for anything we do. Because there's always a reason. How long should a video be? How many components should there be? How many videos should we make? There's all these factors that go into any decision that gets made. And each of those is a small level decision. And in my mind, I'm literally picturing 10 different scales, right? All balancing each other out. And if we push too hard on this side, well, then that throws off this. If we do more of this, we get less of that. And I feel like that analysis, that balancing equation, figuring out the answer. And then when you try and explain that, it's so hard to cover all of those aspects, because any conversation always revolves around like one topic at a time. And there's no way in human language, this is what I struggle with, there's no way to convey 10 ideas at the same time.
Yes. Yeah.
But you can think it in your head, but you can't actually speak it or communicate it. So a lot of times I'm trying to explain something, but it's like, let me get through the 10 points and try and keep that all in mind. Remember it. Don't focus on one thing. But this is like, it's like impossible.
Right. I mean, you're describing just setting up like context for why something might be.
Yeah, basically.
It's just setting up the world before I, hit you with the.
Yeah, it's to convey any reason or rationale. And that's why I think it is a lot more effective as a content creator. The smaller the team, it's less people that you have to go through all these, jump through these hoops with. And it's almost impossible when anyone asks you advice on anything, like, hey, how long should a video be?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it depends.
What are the parameters?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of people ask, like, how much does a video cost? And like, that's one of the worst first questions you could ask, because a lot of it, yes, does depend on, well, what do you actually want to make? Like, what's the deliverable? And then based on that, it's like, well, what's your budget then after that? And then, okay, feasibly, what can you create from those two things, you can kind of triangulate the effort, right?
Yeah,
But
how much does a video cost is the same question as how much does a house cost?
Right.
Like how much does a car cost? It depends.
It's like, how much can you afford? And then ultimately, like, are you going to be living here? Are you going to be raising a family here? Like, what are the other important questions?
So this came up recently with the MJ Biz video we did, the business of cannabis. And one of the unique factors of that is we had more than one character. I think in any paragraphic, it's almost always been one person, maybe two, if it's like a combo, like a pair, partnership, whatever it is. So usually one or two people in a paragraphic. MJ Biz, that business of cannabis video, had 10 different people.
Yes.
Done very different. We weren't on location with any one person. We were at a convention and they all came.
One person. We went to film
Yes,
them. One
that-
person.
yes.
And this was after.
So that actually makes 11, I think. There's 11 people in it then. So 11 people, lot to cover. Very different approach than like our normal thing, which we call scenes, where someone's showing you how to do something. So there's like the show and tell equation. The interview is the telling part. The showing is the scenes.
Yep.
Let me demonstrate this for you, show you how it's done. We had none of that. And it's such a big piece. It's like ended up being 45 minutes that to
Right.
cover it with B-roll had to use stock footage because there's just no feasible way to afford production of custom footage for a 45-minute piece and all these different locations, all these different topics, talking about all these individual things, plus the fact, sorry, I'm like rambling through all this because we talked about this before,
Yep.
plus the fact that a lot of the footage
You got to set up the world
Yeah.
of why this matters.
So you go through also the fact of a lot of the footage we need, it's plants, it's phones, it's billboards, it's business, it's shipping, it's all this stuff. Meanwhile, a lot of that stuff, whether we filmed it or not, basically looks identical. It's more or less the same because we're not demonstrating anything. We're not showing how to do something like step 1, step 2, step 3. We're just talking about concepts. And in that case, video of a phone kind of all looks the same. So what's the meaningful value of filming custom footage? There is some value there. I'm not saying there's none, but on the 10 different scales in my mind, it's, well, let's grab stock footage because it doesn't make sense to film custom footage for, I don't know, there's probably 1,000 shots in that video. I don't know.
It's something where you have like the style, right? I'm sure the people who have commented and who were complaining that we use stock footage, I'm sure they were probably offended because it's like, oh, I subscribe to Paragraphic, this high quality production. Why am I seeing this stock footage?
We have used stock footage before.
Right, exactly. And then we have before. And that's the funny thing, because ultimately the whole goal of the channel is just to teach people, right? It's an educational video. But I do enjoy those comments because it just shows how much people actually care about the quality of the video, which is great, because if they've noticed the quality dip on a few select shots, that's fantastic. But also, I'm curious as to which shots they were probably like more offended by, because there were certain shots that definitely looked very stock footage, and I was actually talking to you when we were building the project, because there are only so many, it seems like, stock, video assets on a website. And there's multiple websites out there. But I found it humorous that there were so few shots of things that you would expect to be a lot more of. So even cannabis, for instance, you would think that there'd be copious amounts of footage, right? But no, it's very, very few, at least the stock footage websites that we have access to. So in that, in that realm, I was able to source plants and shoot my own stock footage that we were able to use, and bridge the gap between the very obvious stock footage and the very custom footage that we've shot.
That's supposed to look like stock
That's
footage.
supposed to look like
so
stock
it's like,
footage, right.
Can you even tell? Also, there's countless YouTube channels that incorporate stock footage, and they're millions of views, right? But like, that's not what
it's entirely stock footage.
Entirely
a lot of those
Movie
YouTubers,
clips.
I've seen those before, and those are pretty much entirely stock footage, aside from maybe like the voiceover / sound effects is custom a lot of the times. But yeah, I feel like for some reason we're held to a different standard,
which is good,
and I like that. Yeah,
I agree. But there's a financial breaking point where it just doesn't make sense, especially on a video about cannabis that's going to be demonetized. So you have all these factors, and I don't even know if we've covered all of them, right? But there's a decision made to we have to use stock footage. I mean, for example, I imagine Katie, who's in the video, talking about how she grew up as a nun. Okay, are we gonna go film a bunch of nuns for this one random part of the doc?
Yeah.
Or are we going to grab stock footage of nuns and monasteries and churches?
And is it better in, the viewer's mind to just watch somebody say it all completely without having something
Probably
to
kind of
look
boring,
at?
right?
And
But I don't know. Maybe they prefer that.
Possibly, but then there's also like, well, how do you cover all the edits? Because there are plenty of edits, which is why B-roll, is nice to use, because not only does it, show you exactly what they're talking about and give you a better reference, but it hides all the edits because, in order to make a piece, 40 minutes long, incorporating 11 different people talking about, many different topics, you're going to need to cut it down and make sure, the story works. So in that, I don't know, I feel like we did a great job of sourcing the right material without going over budget. Even some of the footage that we shot, I don't think you necessarily knew that I was going to shoot extra, video. It was something that we talked about that we wanted. We're like, oh, it'd be great if we had extra footage, but it's not necessarily up to any of us to make anyone do the work, because ultimately it's like, well, we don't really have the money to do it in the first place. So if you want to do it, great, that'll be a benefit, for the whole company. So it's something that, we go out of our way to do, but it's not necessarily something that we're going to set out to do, because it would be a lot of money to get, specific
we reused
footage.
Previous episodes as almost stock footage.
Oh, right. Yep.
Right. Previous cannabis content we'd shot, we're recycling, reusing, putting it together to tell the story that makes, trying to put the best thing out there that we can. But I should say, this is not the plan for future content. We're not only doing this style. So anyone who's like, someone's like, I subscribed since day one and this is garbage, or they didn't say that, but it kind of feels that way. And then other people are like, hey, this is great, I'm so glad this got made. So that's the goal. It's to be creative. You take opportunities to make new styles, new formats, test things out. I think it's the first time we've really used voiceover in any capacity. There's not a lot of it in there, but that's something we're testing out. So it's always trying new things. But then also we've talked about what's paragraphic at its best. I think it's one person showing something really cool about what they do, what they make, an artisan of sorts. That's a pretty broad definition, because we've even recently filmed a race car driver. Is that an artisan? I guess we can say it's an artisan, a mechanic.
Well, somebody who, especially in that specific world, it's their hobby to an extreme, because most people that have a hobby don't go that in depth, thousands of dollars spent, tens of thousands of dollars spent into this hobby, where most people would consider a hobby I like to go hiking or something, not as monetarily expensive. But with this, you're talking about race car driving as a hobby. It's is that a hobby? It can be. Is it, a profession? Definitely. But for this specific subject, it wasn't their profession. But if you saw them in their garage, you'd be like, oh no, clearly you're a race car driver.
Yeah, you're a professional.
But, they're professional.
So yes, my ideal, the perfect paragraphic video is 100% custom. There's no stock footage. It's the best it can be. But oftentimes that's not an option, considering all the scales that are being balanced. And you have to make a decision. Otherwise you sit there and go, well, I guess we won't do it.
Well, right.
And then it doesn't exist.
Well, the hardest part is getting out to do it. And then it's funny when you come back with, the footage and you make the edit, then people are still disappointed.
Well, you got to put something out, because the other option is, okay, well, we're only going to do it if it's perfect, if we can do it exactly this way. Well, how often is life perfect? It's not. And then you end up not doing anything. And the other part of the giant scales and the equation is, yes, the algorithm, the topics, but the quantity matters. On YouTube, you're rewarded for quantity. So you need to push content out, but you want to do it as high quality and as premium as possible. But oftentimes you're at a disadvantage where it's not feasible to do custom. So this is the conversation that, I can't respond in a comment and explain, because it just sounds like excuses. It sounds like defensiveness. And people are so highly critical, which is good to get that feedback. But there's no meaningful way to explain all of this in text, in a comment, to every single person who has that critique. Because every single person is like, oh, boo, stock footage.
Right.
You go, oh my goodness, I can't justify all this away. But I guess that's just the nature of it, right? You can't put the disclaimer up.
Yes. And especially for that specific topic, because it wasn't a topic where it's like the one man band almost of the, like, usually, right, our other paragraphics, we interview the one person at their place of business, and they have all the tools, all the B-roll would be pretty obvious to capture in that one location. But for something that's, you know, a subject where it's not, like, it is theoretical in a sense, because they're talking about, like, oh, what could be, you know, it's like, well, there's no footage to support what could be. So we have to just kind of, you know, find footage online that resembles, you know, it's like, well, this feels right. And it's interesting how we do show different B-roll, because there are some B-roll clips that don't necessarily align one for one, like with what exactly they're talking about, but it does convey the emotion of what they're talking about.
Often called the mushroom of the gods, lion's mane has a long history of medicinal use. This popular nootropic has been shown to enhance focus and increase cognition, helping you feel more productive and accomplished. Research studies have also shown that lion's mane is neuroprotective, giving you peace of mind as you power through your day. Try lion's mane and experience the mental clarity and productivity boost you've been missing. Yes, I want to do the best content possible all the time, but that's very rarely perfect.
Yep.
It's just the best that it can be. And that growth curve, because at the end of the day, the goal is for it to be a business. A business relies on financial, you know, competency. You have to know what you're doing, and the money coming in and the money coming out at the end of the day can't be negative.
Right.
That's not sustainable.
Yeah, and what is the goal? And what we talked about was educational content. So as long as that core goal is still being met, I feel like the icing on the cake is the visual, you know, aesthetics, which I think we do a great job at when it's, you know, smaller. But again, when it's this big, it's not feasible to get custom B-roll for everything.
And my whole goal from the beginning of Paragraphic was using our skills, being as efficient as possible so that the cost can be as low as possible, so we can actually tell stories that would not be told otherwise. There's a level of content you can make by yourself in your bedroom, just from home, voiceover, stock footage. You can make that, you can crank it out. Even now with things like ChatGPT and the AI revolution that's happening now and will be even more prominent in the future, there's a level of content that you can make from home that is valuable, but there's a lot of stories that you need to leave your house to go tell. But unless it's Coca-Cola, Walmart, or McDonald's paying the bill, there's very few companies or individuals that can afford what it costs to make videos. So my goal from the beginning was, let's tell the stories that aren't being told. In the cannabis space, there's plenty of people online just like having fun smoking, but it's very hard to make educational or informative content that isn't like, ooh, look at this drug dealer, look at this, you know, like the dark evil side, because that has like a clickbait sensational aspect to it. But there's nothing that's just like regular corporate content, because there's no incentive to do it. No one's really getting paid to do it because it doesn't make sense to make it, because like the companies can't even advertise. So there's a lot of factors there where I'm passionate about telling those stories, as well as the garage bakers, the aquaponics people, the backyard food forest, because there's a lot of this content that the comedian one is another example. That's probably our worst performing video, stand-up comics. But there's no reason to make a video, a documentary about aspiring open mic stand-up comedians, because they haven't made it yet. So it's a part of the industry you very rarely see unless you go to a show and you happen to see like a couple comics bomb. But it's very rare to get the inside perspective from those people. And even regardless of how that video performed, I'm really glad it exists, because it wouldn't have otherwise unless we just chose to do it. And I feel like that's my driving force, is like, let's tell stories that no one else would, because there's no reason to, other than we just want to see them.
Yeah, and the other impressive feat that Paragraphic is known for, and not this massive, you know, video that we've made, but the other videos, it's 1 day of production, usually like less.
Typically,
right?
1 to 2 days.
It's ideally not 2 days, but what I'm saying is like the efficiency. And,
we are like, capable of doing them in 1 day. Yes.
So it's like 1 day spent, and then ending up with a video that's 20 minutes long that looks like it was a much larger production. So 1 day, typically 2 people, and not often, but like sometimes one.
Just one,
right?
Yeah.
So it's something that can be that high quality, where somebody, you know, is blown away by the visuals and then realize that we don't ever tell, you know, anyone, but if you know that it was all done in 1 day, then that's like the impressive aspect, like you were talking about in the very beginning of this episode. It's like that's like the quality I feel like people have come to like to know. But if they knew it was in one day, like that's where like the mind-blowing part is like, oh, you did that in one day? That's incredible. But usually much larger productions, like if you're familiar with, you know, Netflix documentaries and everything, they're very not overly produced. They're produced exactly to what their budget aligns, which they have a budget. So
Chef's Table, is that the one you're talking about?
Well, just any documentary on Netflix.
Because Chef's Table is like a week of production per episode and $1 million budget per episode.
And nobody necessarily knows that either. They just know that it was a documentary. So
are you saying the viewer or
the viewer? Right. Yeah. So it's like if somebody's watching a documentary on Netflix and then watching a documentary on YouTube, and they're like, "This looks like it should be on Netflix. Why do you have stock footage?" You know, and they're kind of confused as to why. It's like, well, I thought you guys were high quality. It's like, well, we are. It's like this is something that's much larger than what we typically do.
Yeah.
So it's like in order for it to even happen, like even the backgrounds, it's like nobody necessarily knew or maybe I have to read more comments, but nobody has talked about the backgrounds.
The backgrounds being stock.
Right. So in that context, that was almost like a bridge between like, I don't know, like stock locations, right? Almost, because we had a projector, one location, one physical location that we had the people
rundown
that we interviewed.
Airbnb apartment.
Yes, that was as close to the convention center that
convenience.
Yeah, at a strictly convenience.
All the plates are balancing.
Yeah, right. It's like, how do we get the most people in this documentary to give it, you know, the most credibility, but also make it convenient for people who are attending this conference, because
while
so
not
many people
also filming at the conference, because that's impossible.
Yeah, filming at conferences, and we've done this, you know, years past. It's always loud. It's always, you know, a difficult situation to film at a conference because some people make you pay to rent areas, and just to avoid all that, we decided to rent a location that was literally walking distance from the convention center, so that when people are coming from around the world to go to this one convention, it's like, yeah, we want to interview all these people, because as opposed to flying people out independently, you know,
or us flying to them,
right? Or us flying to them. So it's like already cutting costs there to have, you know, one location. And then we had, you know, the idea to do like a projection background, that like you brought a projector so that we could literally change all the locations that we want. Like, okay, maybe we want to be in a high rise. Cool. Let's look up stock photos of a high rise, put it in the background. Cool. Match the lighting, which is one thing that we did dial in on set, were, you know, the actual practical lights, in order to, well, practical in like our sense, to make it, you know, blend in to the background. So we would have, you know, our edge light, we would try to match the scene as the fake background. And there was one interview where we actually flew out to the person to film them in person, which it does look better than the other interviews, right? If you actually were to,
but it also matches pretty close too.
But it matches pretty close. So, but only because it was all of our, you know, traditional style, shot in the same camera, same lenses, same, you know, typical distance we always do.
Same lighting.
But yeah, it's interesting how like nobody necessarily knows that, but it's so brief, because typically when we do, you know, any documentary, we don't want to sit on them all too much in the interview, because it's not interesting. We want to show B-roll. We want to show like a scene, because learning, like watching and learning, so much easier than just, you know, watching somebody lecture.
Yeah, and I chose not to do green screen, because it was the other option. Why don't we green screen? We can put them wherever we want.
Yeah.
I was even playing around
after the fact, yeah.
Unreal, the Unreal Engine 5, seeing if we could do some kind of virtual backdrop that way. And at the end of the day, the technical simplicity of just having a projector with a stock photo that matched more or less the focal. Like, it's not perfect, but it's close enough where it kind of tricks the eye.
Yep.
That was the best way to save time in post-production, because the thing about green screen is you have to get it right. And if you don't, you spend hours in post-production. And even then, it can still look like that's green screen.
Right.
And it looks bad.
And it can look good.
It can.
But to again, save ourselves time, make it as efficient as possible. We had the background there. The people knew when they came in, everyone that we were interviewing, they understood what was going on. They're like, oh, whoa, that's cool. Like, that's where I'm going to be. Oh, awesome.
because there's so many variables, especially we're grabbing random people. What if someone walked in and they had a green sport coat on, or they had glasses on that are like super refractive where you can like see the background through the glasses, or they're wearing a watch or something shiny jewelry. There's so many problems with green screen or blue screen for that matter that you have to prep your actors. Well, we're interviewing random people at a convention. I don't know what they're going to wear.
Right.
So they sit down, guess what? They can wear green. They can wear jewelry. They can do all this stuff. And we're prepared.
Yep.
And these are all the plates that we're balancing. So when anyone says like, oh, you should have just done it this way. It's like every decision we make is intentional, but it's very hard to explain that to somebody from the outside looking in because, yeah, of course you would do it a different way based on your set of circumstances.
And I'm sure somebody watching just this portion, they'll be like, oh, well, why didn't you get a location that you could just, go around different areas of that one location and get cool shots? Which you could do, but not
we talked about
in the proximity of the convention center of walking distance. So all these, factors that nobody knows, right, that go into the decision-making process of when they drop that comment. They're just like, you guys suck or whatever. It's like, well,
I don't think it was that. But the thing is that any comment that's critical is, I agree, is the kind of the take home. I agree that it should be better. But like, this is also a scenario where people don't realize we don't have the $1 million budget that Chef's Table has. We don't have the week of production that Chef's Table has for one episode. Yeah. We're trying to make YouTube content as frequently as possible, but that comes with what are all the factors at play? We got to make as much as we can, but we got to keep it high quality for our own standards. So always finding that balance is the hardest part of any business really, but certainly production and creative fields.
There was one of the proof videos we were recently shooting. Was the jalapeno cheddar loaf video, and in that video I know John was talking about the having an audience for whatever you're making, right? So he has people that love the bread, so you can have people that love the high quality bread you make, but at any point you try to maybe cut cost and get ingredients that aren't as good, your customers are going to know and they're going to stop buying. So are you really going to try to save money to wealth, or are you going to try to create the best product and then just have more and more customers?
It's always a balancing act, because even if you pick the best ingredients, there's always better ones. Like Chef's Table, right? Oh, I use this particular fish from this particular part of the ocean because, it's just the best. But then there's also the practical aspect of, well, I don't live in that location, so I'm going to use tuna from a can, which is probably like the worst product. There's always factors at play, and whatever you decide, there's always a better way to do it, and there's always a worse way to do it. And it's really just finding what works for you, and kind of probably the best thing I've resolved myself to is just ignore the criticism, because there's no good way to even respond to it, because anything I say is just an excuse, because it truly is an excuse. Right. But I don't want to come across like making excuses.
As long as you're trying to be better with everything you're doing. Yeah. So it's like what I was trying to say was, it's like you shouldn't try to get ahead by cutting any corners, because cutting corners, ultimately, it's like somebody's, they're going to notice. Ultimately, you know what you're doing. So like, why are you cutting corners? And then if somebody finds out you're cutting corners, then they're not going to be too impressed either. So it's the only way to truly get ahead is if you actually try hard.
That's true. And doing more than the bare minimum, because anyone can do the bare minimum. That's the easy part. It's pushing yourself, but also not pushing yourself to the point where, in our case, the content just wouldn't exist.
Yeah, it's the only
sitting there doing nothing.
It's the only way to build a business at all, right? It's like you have to offer something that's better than the competitor, right? It's like, how do you get more viewers? Like, you have to make something that's more compelling to watch. It's like, how do you get somebody to buy this bread? It's like, well, it has to taste better than everyone else,
or it has to be cheaper.
It can be cheaper, but in I'm sure a lot of people's experience, you will buy the cheaper option only to realize that you've wasted your money, because you'll take one bite and say, you know what, I'm going back to the expensive stuff, because it's not worth it to me. The experience is far less. There are, and we kind of talked about it in the NAB experience, but it's finding that knockoff brand that isn't actually knockoff, You know, it's like, oh, you're cheaper. You must be a knockoff of this other kind of company. And then you use the product and you realize like, oh, this is actually a small team of people. They're just really enthused about making a product that works. And they're coming in at a price point in order to enter the market. So it's, as much as it is, you know, like the quality of the product, it's like sometimes you just have to find the right people entering the market at the same time that you're trying to be better yourself.
The word bokeh comes from a Japanese term that literally translates to the flavor or taste of the blur, or said another way, the quality of the blur. When you're focused on one thing, it necessarily means you're unfocused on the surroundings. But what is the quality of that experience? Are you able to concentrate on your priorities? Or are you distracted and overwhelmed with all the to-dos? Are you able to accomplish your goals? Or do you not even get started at all? Water, oxygen, protein, fruits, vegetables, vitamins, minerals, mushrooms. Nature is abundant with everything we need to thrive, but many of us are depleted of these essential nutrients. We are what we eat. You become what you consume. While an unhealthy lifestyle will give us poor results, a healthy daily routine is positive for the body, mind, and soul. In a world dominated by distractions, easy excuses, and endless indulgences, the smallest change can have the biggest impact. Stay focused. Speaking of stock footage,
Yeah,
my
speaking of
goodness,
stock footage.
oh, that video is all stock footage. How dare
Which
they?
I would love some gummies.
I know I haven't. I had some lion's mane this morning, but I didn't do the gummies yet. So we can have some gummies.
This is the one time I have gummies.
They're really good. They taste really good. But yeah, there's lots of good bokeh products. Oh, I got 3. I'll save one for later. We're supposed to have 2. So I gotta like wait to eat mine because you're eating yours.
Oh yeah. One moment.
One moment.
Is that annoying?
I think at the end of the day, any endeavor, you got to start somewhere. And then you got to take the steps to get to where you ultimately want to go. Very few people, I think I've said this, any video we've done has not been perfect, has not been my ideal, has not been the exact way I would do it in a world of infinite budget, infinite time, infinite resources. But what's the alternative? To do nothing, to just sit around and wait? Whatever you do, you got to get started somewhere. So you do the most with what you have.
It's honestly surprising when you do see people that like are so successful on YouTube, and then you find out that it's like a one-man band, and you're just like, oh my goodness, how can you possibly do this all yourself? But it is easy when you actually care to do it, which I found that like when we work together, it's very easy for us to come out with a product like in one day because we both have the same like goal in mind. It's like, how do we get a lot of epic footage, like all the sound bites that are the coolest sound bites? How do we do all this and leave and be happy? Because we've been on shoots in the past where we've walked away and like, oh yeah, we have everything, and then come to find out, man, I wish I would have, got the extra drone shot. Oh, I wish I would have had this person say this one line. Oh man. Oh well, until next time. So now when we go out, I feel like without having to talk to each other, we have it in our mind of like, I know I can't leave here without, these shots. So we have kind of like a checklist in our head, but also it's like we also try to like impress ourselves every time we go out. It's that 1%, right? Every time we go out, 1% better. So you got to be born with it, right? It's got to be something that's just inside of you.
The content demands nowadays, the current year, is you need quantity. You need to feed quantity, because if you came out with like a video, even like once a year, the chances of that going viral enough to pay the bills to sustain an individual, let alone a whole business or a whole company, is very, very unlikely. Like that's rolling. Those are odds you don't want to take, right? The game nowadays is quantity matched with quality. That's so hard. And I wish it was the days of like old school Hollywood filmmaking where you had like a couple years to work on your masterpiece, that'd be great.
You can still spend a couple of years if you want.
But even these days, like look at the Marvel movies, right? They spend a year or two putting them together, and they're constantly doing reshoots and we got to change the script, we got to do this, we got to change it after the fact. The visual effects are all over the place. They're changing things. It's actually, we need a different color. It's not red, it's green now. They're changing everything, and they still turn out garbage. People hate them, right? They say, this is terrible. Why didn't they spend more time on this? They spent 2 or 3 years on it. So it is the inevitable, I guess, criticism you're going to face, right? You got to put the best thing out there that you can do, but it's also, it's better to put something out than nothing at all, I think, anyway, because then you actually get that feedback and you can improve for the next one. Yeah.
And with our videos, they are relatively simple in the core, definition, of what a paragraphic video is, which, in this new video that we have, it's not a typical paragraphic video.
No.
I'm sure like once we get back into going back to like the one character, it's going to be back to, what people would expect to see, not
which is
stock
what it's
footage.
always meant to be. It's always supposed to have been that. Like
So it's something where it's like, okay, like people who are offended now, rest easy, they'll go back
Relax.
to seeing, they'll go back to seeing quality, shorter, more concise, very epic looking video
about an individual.
Because
the whole goal has been, what are the stories of people that aren't being told that we can tell, and how can we do it as efficient as possible so that it's possible for one person to do it? Not that it's always been one person doing it, but it's possible that one person could conceivably do this.
Yeah, and we both do this on the side as well, right? It's we both do like freelance projects, and I can't count how many times people are constantly like blown away at the deliverables that they get from a one-man band operation, because a lot of the stuff that we do, we've done so long that it's just easy to do kind of alone or like with a smaller team, because once you get, the larger crews and everything, it's almost more time consuming just to be managing people as opposed to just getting the job done. So it's very interesting when we do these like paragraphic videos and we still get the feedback of like, oh man, like how many people do you usually have on set? And we've definitely been on productions where a similar quality video is done by 15 people.
Correct.
And then we're sitting there like, well, I did it myself, I did it with one person, 2 people maybe. And it's always interesting to see, because especially nowadays, like content doesn't even need to be high quality, right? It's the core content is what matters. It's like if somebody's looking something up, it's like, how do I do this? I just want to see how to do it. Do I care if it's, cinematic? Potentially. But ultimately it's about the core content. It's like, I need to know this information. I'm trying to find it. Does it exist? But for us, it's a little bit different.
And last year, so this is maybe something people don't realize. Last year, I tried to make as many paragraphic videos as possible. I pushed to get me and you and the other, it's basically me and you and then a couple other people who kind of help out from time to time, to make as much as possible, because 2020 was the first year and there were 6 episodes. 2021 was the second year and there were only 4 episodes. But at that point, it had built enough subscribers, enough trajectory to go, okay, like let's triple down. And this third year, let's do as much as possible. So 2022, I think we did 30 episodes or some crazy number. And none of those, right? None of those actually mattered in terms of like the subscriber count or historical views, because every video we do is kind of unique and kind of different. It's a different person. It's a different topic. And because of the nature of that, none of it made financial sense. And it's like, all right, man, well, let's 2023, let's figure out what we can do. Like, let's do a podcast, let's do Patreon, let's do Boca, let's figure out these other ways,
sponsored videos,
to drive revenue to make a sustainable business, because it's not enough to get subscribers on YouTube, because we've talked about this before, but YouTube literally won't recommend the video to your own subscribers.
Yeah.
And you can see it in the impressions. So even though we've got millions of views on some videos and people who've subscribed saying, hey, I like this, any video we make they're all these one-off kind of anomalies. Basically, every single video is its own unique entity. And so we have to figure out, okay, how much should we do? What's the level of investment we should put on any one piece of content? And how do we diversify the content so we're able to do things like a podcast that's a lot easier?
Yep.
We talk for an hour and hit upload. That's done compared to a paragraphic where, we're only spending a day filming, but that's still at least a week in editing.
Post-production.
And that's minimum. More likely 2 or 3 weeks, and then you have to stagger that with all the other stuff. Meanwhile, we're doing all this in our spare time and our free time.
Which is what I was going to say, because typically it wouldn't take that long, but because we still have, we still work outside of this. This is not,
gotta pay the bills.
Yeah, this doesn't pay the bills, so it's something that we do for fun, which is great because it's not only something that we enjoy doing. It's definitely it's a good practice, right? It's not. Like, yes, it's a high quality video, and I call it practice because every time we talk about getting better every single shoot, or at least encountering a new scenario. It's like the wind that we encountered with the paramotor shoot. It's like we don't typically shoot in windy situations like a high wind. So it's a much, like, we didn't even use lights necessarily for anything we did for that shoot. So it was one of the rare shoots where we don't light the interview. But that's to say that, like, who needs lights? As long as lighting or, composition, you can still make things look, cinematic, make it look great. But it's it's all the effort. I don't know. Lost my train of thought.
Well, it's the goal for me from the beginning has been make good content, but also do it in a way that other people could look at and replicate. So instead of using a $50,000 camera that you need 2 of, so $100,000 just in the cameras, let's use a camera that is more affordable, more approachable. So we did basically half the paragraphics on the GH5. It's $1,000 camera now. More recently, we're using the GH6. That's a $1,500 camera. That's pretty approachable for anyone who's serious about filmmaking. Yep. The lights we're using, relatively affordable. Like you just said, half the time we're not even using lights because we're just using lighting, using the sun or the natural light that's there. Doing it in a way that when other people look in and they say, well, how did they do this? It's like, it's 1 or 2 people. Yeah. It's really inexpensive equipment and you can make something exceptional. And I think that is a story that the more we tell it, it's just a matter of time, because that's half the comments too, is like, how is this channel not at 1 million subscribers? And I'm like, I don't know. I wish it were.
I had a conversation recently with one of my friends, and like they're a small business owner, and it's for a small business owner, if they're independent, right? If they have like their own specific, like one thing that they do, you're talking about a person that has to be an expert in marketing, right? In order to get their own business off the ground, because a lot of small businesses, when you're first starting out, there's no way for you to know any of this information or have the funds to even hire somebody to do that for you. So I find myself...
And good luck. Even if you hire them, they're probably terrible.
Right. And I find myself in a position where I can help my friends a lot by helping them create content, because it's that thing where if you have the perceived quality, if you post videos or photos that look exceptionally well, that must mean that you have a high quality product, high quality service, whatever it is. So it's that kickstart to revenue for a lot of companies, where if it's like I said, it's the perceived value. It's like, oh wow, like this looks good. This must be of quality. I'm gonna consider a purchase. But for somebody on their own trying to create content, it's a very difficult hill to climb if you don't know how to create content like that's compelling.
And that's what I've always wanted to do, is to put that content out there so people had something to look to and go, hey, I could do that. I could actually, that's achievable. And it's not your garbage typical what you'd expect from just a random person with a camera. It's actually cinematic. Hey, this reminds me of something I might see on Netflix. That's doable with modern technology, with one person, just who's trained and knows what they're doing.
I've always wondered why certain people were selected to be featured on, like, let's not necessarily a chef's table, like pre-chef's table, all these great looking documentaries, but why did they choose that person? It might be like a news network. It's like, oh, they're featuring this restaurant, whatever it is. It's like, who chose those people? Like, why are they important? So it's nice to be on the other side of that, like choosing the person to be highlighted and highlighting them in the best way ever, right? It's a very cinematic expression of what they do. And a lot of people don't get that opportunity. A lot of people get maybe showcased in the newspaper or, it's somebody might have a nice Yelp review, but it's very rare that they'll have like this level of production that showcases what they do, who they are, what they're about.
So anything that's advertiser driven, like if you think of ads, the whole goal is impressions, is views, is getting those numbers up. So the local news is just as guilty as any other outlet when it comes to impressions. And if advertising is your business, it is always whether it starts this way or not, it always edges towards quantity. Mm-hmm. And daytime talk shows, the news, they'll have basically whoever on, as long as it's within reason, right? Because they have an endless bucket of content to fill because they're doing it every single day. Yep. So as premium as it feels, like, oh, you were featured on the news, or oh, you were on this talk show, or the unspoken secret that most people don't realize is that those outlets are relatively easy to access if you have the right connections, which a lot of people, if you're in the industry, do, somebody who can get you on, and they'll happily have you. Right? Oh, well, yeah, we'll do another feature, in the local news or whatever, because they just need the content. They they just endless. They need it. So it's always towards quantity. So yeah, you might have situations where like a high quality local business gets featured, but just as equally, you might have a low quality local business gets featured because they're just hungry and desperate for the eyeballs. Personal story, I'll tell on this. There's these at-home treadmills now, the walking treadmills. You have one downstairs.
It's not a walking treadmill, but yes.
Yeah, it's a smaller it's not a Nordic track.
Oh no, it's not huge. It's not it's I would say it's like in the middle. You can run on it.
So there's a company, and I'm gonna throw them under the bus. Treadly. They came out with the Treadly 2. It's featured in all these like news reports. Oh, it's so great. Oh, it's so handy. Fits right into the bed. Blah blah blah. My wife wanted one. So this is Christmas. Okay, think back Christmas. This is like half a year ago. Yep. Even before Christmas, Black Friday, big sale. Okay, I'll order one of these. And sure enough, and it's featured in all these news outlets. So I'm like, oh, it must be a great one, right? Dumb me. Okay, this is spoilers a little bit. I ordered it. It doesn't show up before Christmas. So at that point, I'm like, all right, cancel this stupid order. I'm just gonna get some other brand. I'll find one on Amazon or something. And oh no, it's on the way, because I'm contacting these people going, hey, where's my treadmill? You said you were going to ship it out. Oh, just 2 more weeks, 1 more week. Oh, it's on a boat, it's coming. Doesn't show up. So I finally cancel it, and I say, hey, I want a refund on this because you never sent me the product. And they go, okay, we'll process it. 7 to 10 business days. No refund.
Wow.
Oh my goodness. So I have to ask them again. Oh, there was an issue in our accounting department, finance. Oh, but we'll get on it. 7 to 10 business days. Just wait. Just 1 more week, wait. So this is prolonged over and over and over again on the shipping side of getting the product out, getting the refund. So finally I contact my bank and I'm like, listen, I ordered this product. It didn't show up. I asked them 5 times probably for a refund. They don't process the refund. I want to dispute this transaction because this is like an $800 treadmill. It's not just like a $50 whatever on Amazon. It's $800. Contact the bank. They're like, okay, yeah, we need 90 days to like investigate. Go, oh my goodness. All right, I'll wait another 90 days for the bank to investigate. They come back and they say, oh yeah, you're outside of the time window to file a dispute. So it's too late. Too bad, so sorry. So now that's where I'm at in this process. So I have to follow up with my bank saying, actually, I've been contacting them the whole time. They're delaying it. But yeah, I'm outside my time window to dispute or whatever. But this is all because there's so many news outlets like, I tried the Treadly 2 for 30 days and here's the results and blah, blah, blah. Convince my wife that this is a good treadmill. Ask me for Christmas, buy this. Yeah. So I do. I go out of my way. And guess what? It's basically, it seems like a scam to me. The fact they have this product that they don't ship and they don't give you a refund. It can
be, but it could also be their marketing department, which was a little probably overzealous and promising something that they couldn't fulfill.
Sure, then give a refund. Then give a refund.
That would be ultimately what you'd want to do, but I'm sure somebody at the business was like, "No, we can spent fulfill that already. It. We can fulfill it.
No, I canceled it. Give me that refund."
Yeah. So I can see how it's a very unique position that companies find themselves in once they become hot sellers, right? I feel like that was like the big like the Oprah kind of effect. It's like if you had a book that was featured on Oprah, all of a sudden you'd sell out, you know?
Yes.
So it's almost like it's unfortunate where too good of, like you can almost have too good of business where you don't have like the stock to supply the people who actually want your product, which is
Sure.
unfortunate because you could miss out on like a lot of sales.
Then give a refund.
Right. But in this scenario where it's like an online, you know, pre-order almost, where it's like, yeah, like look at how much we sold, and then realizing that you don't have, you know, the stock to actually ship, which of course, you know, I'm sure they're all backpedaling because we're like, we don't want to lose all this money that just came in, because ultimately it's like if you were to fulfill the orders, you'd have customers hopefully for life. Maybe they're a little bit pissed off right now, but hopefully if they get the product in the next couple weeks, then they'll try it, be nice and happy. But it's a situation where it's like, oh, you didn't deliver, therefore I'm upset. I feel like that's a lot of Amazon reviews that I've read, where you will look at a product and see that it's, you know, 4 out of 5 stars. You're like, all right, well, let me look at like the 5 stars just to see. And a lot of them could be misconstrued as fake. You could be like, oh, this was paid for. But then you look at some of the 1 stars and you realize that it doesn't have anything to do with the product. It's like, oh, this came a week late, 1 star. It's like, well, it had nothing to do with the product. You were more upset with the experience than the product itself, because who knows if the product worked as well as the reviewers had said, then I'm sure you'd be content. But because of the service, because the service was so terrible, you just have a complete horrible taste. You're like, nope, I'd rather not do business with you at all.
But that's the benefit of Amazon and why I think they've been so successful. Because, I mean, I've had Amazon Prime for years now, and for as much as, you know, bad press and PR that Amazon gets, still to this day, they do a pretty good job with customer service.
They do a great job of customer service.
And they have some of the strictest, tightest, you know, like if you're going to sell on Amazon, you got to go through all these hoops. You got to make sure it's this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be a Prime seller, it's you got to meet the demand, right? What we're talking about. You got to meet that demand. And if it doesn't show up or there's some issue, they refund you right away.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no wonder that people are going to shop on Amazon, for as evil a corporation as it is. When you go buy from these other websites, from these other people, they're almost worse.
Right.
And you're like, I wanted to like go support this startup company, you know, do a good thing and get a cool product. And then it just pushes me back towards Amazon because they at least take care of the customer.
Right. And we've seen this on smaller scales where it's interesting how it's like you could try to support local, and there have been like small boutique businesses that if they only support maybe like farmers market type people, they're a lot less reliable than, you know, box chain stores that have products, you know, routinely coming in because they know they have customers waiting. So it's that fine line of being able to like give a little, almost like, you know, like I almost expect that you're not going to have the products there every week because you're a local farmer, let's say. But who's to say I'm going to maintain, you know, the customer relationship that you have, because I might go somewhere else. Because if enough time passes and the product's never there, why would I continue waiting?
I think that was the Amazon ethos from the very beginning, was just customer service is like number one. Mm-hmm. And it proves, like, look how good, how big that company has grown off of that one thing of just high quality customer service compared to basically every other company that tries to do online shipping, online purchasing. Yeah. Terrible customer service. And you go, all right, well, I'm just going to go buy everything on Amazon.
That's how it works, which, it's unfortunate, but yeah, that's how it is.
Boca Smoothie Greens is a blend of organic grasses, superfoods, B vitamins, and botanical extracts designed to fuel the body with broad-spectrum nutrients for optimal mental and physical functionality. This whole food blend empowers the body through fruits and vegetables, organic grasses, adaptogens, immune-boosting herbs, plant extracts, and enzymes. With Boca Smoothie Greens, you can quickly supercharge with the best nature has to offer. Actually really good. Those Boca Smoothie Greens.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the footage there.
Oh,
talking about stock footage and how the footage that we've shot for Paragraphic videos, like reusing the footage to put in those those ads, where it looks like stock footage, which is hilarious in context.
The circle
It's
is
not,
complete.
right?
Don't use stock footage.
Don't
Okay,
use
we'll
stock
make it
footage.
so
We're
good that it's stock footage.
Right, we're gonna yeah. So it is interesting how in context it does not look like stock footage, but almost like out of context, like in this sense where it's like a commercial where there's, you know, multiple scenes that could be pulled from different paragraphic videos we've done, and then it looks like stock footage because it's like, well, yeah, it's like this looks like a, you know, typical advertisement you'd see for some kind of pharmaceutical company. Yeah, it's like, you know, a guy, you know, farming. Okay, cool. A guy racing. Oh, cool. And then realize like, oh, all that stock footage was from these actual episodes. So I feel like it's a good roundabout way to say we produce very high quality stock footage.
And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter unless you know. And I think that's also the problem too when you're talking about marketing or getting your product out there. I think we've talked about this before probably, that your friends and family are almost like the worst audience because they give you like the pat on the head, like, oh, good job. You know, that's nice. That's nice. And instead of like somebody who's coming across it for the first time, seeing it and they have no idea what it is. And they go, wow, this is incredible. This is so good. It should be on Netflix. Versus like your friends and family go like, oh, good job.
Right.
That's nice.
We've made videos. Well, what I like about the paragraphic universe and like a lot of the videos we've made on other channels, like for other people, is the level, like the pedestal that we're able to put people on because of how cinematic we can make them appear to be. So it's not just that they're an influencer and you just see them a lot and you just have that like, oh, okay, they're famous because they're famous. It's more of they're almost like unattainable. It's like you look like a movie star kind of thing. So like we've been in,
which that is the secret of movie stars, is the reason they look like it's just because there's a camera pointed at them,
right? And lights, and they look, you know, a certain way. They look heroic with like the certain.
That's
like,
what I'm always trying to tell
lenses, you know,
people
positioning.
is that like they don't look that good.
Right.
You think they look that good
Yeah.
because of the makeup, the lighting, the cameras, everything.
Editing, making them sound better than they actually do in person. Motivational music. That's I was having a conversation with one of my friends about just like propaganda and how even good propaganda is still propaganda, right? So even, you know, you take any video from like our government, for instance, and you have like, you can have a normal speech from a president, but once you put music behind that speech, then it means something else. And then once you start cutting the speech down and adding B-roll, and all of a sudden you can convey entirely different emotions based on how you chose to edit it, the pacing, the music ultimately, because you can choose, you know, a piece of music that's a little bit more aggressive, you know, to get people pumped up, or a little bit more somber, you know. So it's all a lie, right? It's all just a show. But like I said, it's being able to put somebody on a pedestal, and then for people to, like, we've been filming, like, let's say Proof, for example, the bread company. Like, we've been filming inside the location where people have come, you know, up to us and say, oh, are you guys the ones who shoot the videos? I'm here from whatever country. I'm here from Germany. It's like, you're here from Germany. You came all the way from Germany to be here. And they're like, oh yeah, I saw it online all the time. So it's like that feeling of like, wow, we made a bakery a destination. And that's ultimate. Like, that's like the ultimate feeling of like, whoa, it's like, we did that to you? Like, you were that inspired to come here because of what we made? That's awesome. So
it affects everybody when you know that it's like the familiarity or something, knowing about something, and then like you see it. Like, I think of some, like a house, right? You could go down the street and see all the homes, but then you drive by and you go, oh, that's the Breaking Bad house where he threw the pizza on the roof. I got to stop and look at it. And it's like a tourist spot now because it just happened to be the house in this show. It could have been any other house on that block, but it's that house.
Yeah.
And that familiarity makes such a strong connection with human beings for whatever reason. It's probably somewhere in our evolution and our DNA that we're wired this way. But that's the power of content, that you can tell these stories and you point a camera at something and you use the right music, you get the right B-roll, and all of a sudden you're changing minds and making people think different thoughts just because of what you showed them.
There's that the paparazzi effect, where if people like, if there's a bunch of paparazzi taking photos of somebody, people are going to turn their head and say, like, and ask, who is that? Like, why are they famous? Like, why is everyone looking at them? What's going on? Why do they have cameras? So we do that right, in person, but
for real.
for real, yeah, for real. But it's
We're not paparazzi.
and it has this like weird effect on people, not so much on the people we interview. Maybe now, because we have so many followers, like someone will be more intimidated on being, on camera because they're like, ooh, I don't know, like quarter million people could potentially see me.
Yeah, it's the
if
unfortunate
not more.
downside of like growing something big. At the beginning, the hard part was asking people, and they'd go, well, like, who are you?
Right.
Like, what is this? Why?
Yeah,
You
why?
know? Now it's that intimidation factor, and they go, oh, you're somebody.
I could be
this is a
seen.
big deal.
Yeah. So
And it's like, no, we just want you to be yourself, be
Right.
authentic.
and
That's it.
and it's twofold, right? If they agree to do it, it could be great promotion for their company, right? It's something that they could use in marketing, but also it's like obviously beneficial to us. We're trying to like expand our audience, and it's always interesting when we put somebody in that spotlight. Everybody in the immediate vicinity is just like, who is that person? Like they were just a normal person 5 seconds ago, but once we pull out the cameras, all of a sudden they're like, why are they being interviewed? Like, who is that? Why should I know them? Who is that? It's a very interesting phenomenon that happens.
And that's the important part. At the end of the day, everybody's just a human being, regardless of how famous you are, how many followers you have, how much influence you have. People are just people. And I think it changes you if you live and grow up in that environment and you get used to it.
Mm-hmm.
But as an outsider, as just a spectator, it's important to remember that people are just people. There's nothing really necessarily special about anyone that we filmed or that's become, gotten a bunch of attention or a lot of eyeballs. Like at the end of the day, they're just people, regular human beings doing human things. And I don't know, I want to keep telling those kind of stories of just your regular people that no one knows about and kind of make them more of that elevated celebrity status rather than just going and pointing a camera at somebody that everybody already knows.
Right. I think we need to disguise ourselves when we go and film future paragraphics.
Like big mustaches.
We'll call it something completely different.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're onto this?
Oh, yeah.
Good?
We could, so
So
Hollywood,
people
they
won't
have
be as intimidated because
the fake names for their productions.
Yeah.
What was the Blue Harvest is like the famous one for Star Wars, right?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, for Star Wars, it wasn't called Star Wars. It was called
in order to
Blue
shoot like at a
Harvest, I think.
location. Yeah.
Yeah, just to kind of keep it under
wraps.
Yeah.
I feel like we should start doing that because it's definitely something that we've noticed more recently where people are a little bit more not intimidated and not necessarily anxious. It's that feeling that I'm sure people get of like, I have so much to talk about and now I'm trying to get it all out at once. And then they kind of seem like they're overwhelmed when it should just be a casual conversation. It's like, oh no, I'm just here to talk about, what you got going on. And then they're just like, well, I have my checklist here. It's like, well, okay, just, you're a normal person. We're normal people. We just want to show you doing your thing.
Yeah, we have always done it the same way. We haven't brought a bigger crew. It's just the same casual conversational format we always do. And I think there's many more of those to come. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's trying to figure out how to make it all make sense.
Yeah, and we have a few different, like we were talking about earlier today, different, hopefully, techniques that we can try to implement. I want to try something new as far as like how we interview people, because if we could turn that into another piece of content in its own, that'd be a very interesting development because, yeah, it's like, how do we become even more efficient? How do we make that content itself without having to just leave it all on hard drives? Because there's a lot of content that we cut out of interviews. Not that it's, bad, but it just doesn't make the cut for, the 20 minutes that we have. So if we could find a way to utilize all that other information, because a lot of it's good information, but we have to find a way that it actually makes sense.
Yeah, it's one of the other factors, the contributing factors, was how many times we filmed products in the past where 95% of it sat on a hard drive that no one ever saw.
Yeah.
So making the most out of it. So it's not like content for content's sake. It's we filmed this, it's good, it's quality, but there really isn't a use for it. It's finding new uses for that content so that it's not wasted just sitting on a hard drive taking up space that no one ever gets to see or consume. Aside from us, we got the experience,
right? But
there is a lot of it that's like, this isn't quite fit, but like it's still really good.
Yep.
So figuring out new unique ways to use that, I think, is a lot of fun. to try and roll this. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoy our documentaries as much as we enjoy making them. Unfortunately, many of our videos don't earn enough YouTube revenue to afford the cost of production. But if you like our content, the best thing you can do is directly support it on Patreon. Plus, you'll get access to behind-the-scenes vlogs and commentary. If you're looking for something more in return, go to paragraphic.io where you can buy our other products and services. Alternatively, you can shop our Amazon storefront for our favorite equipment recommendations. Also, check out Boca, where you can find beneficial supplements to optimize your productivity. We especially love the lion's mane and mushroom gummies. And finally, consider signing up to Multitude, a platform built for long-form content, where you and other content creators can share and monetize new videos every week.